Welcome to Visual Studio Online Fundamentals. In this session, we're going to be talking about a lap around Visual Studio Online. I'm James Tupper.
And I'm Stephen Borg.
So let's talk about the overview of what we're going to be doing in this session. We're going to be talking about what is Visual Studio Online. And then we're going to be doing an overview demo of it, a lap around Visual Studio Online, right? So what is Visual Studio Online? It originates from the product Team Foundation Server. Now, Team Foundation Server is basically a place where you host source control, you do agile planning, you have work items to track work, you have team rooms so that people can talk to one another, test case management, and that includes running the test cases and tracing them back all the way from code into requirements, and so on and so forth. You get feedback management, continuous build, and continuous integration, right? You have all these great things in Team Foundation Server. Now, Visual Studio Online is essentially the hosted version of that, as well as a bountiful set of services that complement it, right? So there's the build service, there's the load testing service, application insights, continuous deployment to Azure. So you can kind of think of Visual Studio Online as TFS as well as a bunch of these other hosted services that complement it, that add to it, that gives them more features and gives you more functionality in order to develop software. So let's go ahead and jump in. Do you want to show me?
I'm ready and willing. I'm
Perfect.
Very excited. Let's jump into a lap around Visual Studio Online. If we pop over to my screen, I am at a particular version. And I'll show you how to set this up maybe a little bit later. But here I am at a URL, nwc.visualstudio.com. And you can see this is my homepage. Basically, we start right here. I have many team projects. These are repositories with source control and work items and things of that nature here. I have team rooms. This is a place where people can get together and chat amongst themselves and really solve some difficult issues and have that tracked and searchable at a later point in time. I've got some links to things like load testing and integration with other services. I can get into getting started with application insights. There's, of course, some news here as well. And I want to point everybody to this attention, Start Account Trial. When you sign up, if you click that, it'll set your timer for go for 90 days when you get all the full features end to end of this whole thing. Couple other things I want to point out. We're going to talk about them later, but build. I've used 15 out of my free 60 minutes of hosted build service, and I haven't yet used any of my load testing minutes. And that's a way that I can use Microsoft's infrastructure to load test my websites. So let's get started. And to do so, I want to jump in to Nirvana. Now, this is one particular team project, and you get an idea of what it's like to work on a project. So you can think of this as a project or a product that I'm working in. And the first thing I see is kind of this colorful thing here with things like documentation or critical bugs or stale work items. These items here happen to be links to work item queries. They show me things. It's some status. It looks like, James, we've deferred 6 particular features for later. And I'm not sure why. We could drill into that and figure out why. We'll do so in the future. If I look here, I see what are the changes that have recently occurred inside of various source code repositories that I have. Now, if I particularly pinned these, and I can go into any of them and I can unpin them as well. But I kind of want them here. And then I have my automated builds. Now, you saw I've already burned 15 minutes of my allocated free 60 minutes, but you can see here I've been doing a lot of builds on things like the data collector, the web, the data pipeline. These are different builds that I've been running. It gives me neat information if I float over them, if it failed, how long it ran for, etc., those sorts of things. And I can see my members of this team as well and manage those members. So that's my home page. That's really basically where do I sit when I've got this Visual Studio Online. And I see this. Now, let's dive into some of those key elements. And we're going to be going into a lot more detail, but let's start on code. Why code? Frankly, you need a place to put your source code so that it is up away from the failure on your particular hard drive. You push these things up, either you go to a Team Foundation server that's running on premises. But this is a beautiful way to get that functionality out in the cloud where Microsoft is maintaining the infrastructure and they're doing all this for you. This is a safe place to put your code and get it pushed up in the cloud. So if I look at this, here's a particular hunk of code, this safe process template. And I can drill into this process template and see basically the code that was used and that's been uploaded, as well as all of its changes. You can see I can look at commits for it, branches, pull requests, etc. The idea behind this particular page, though, is it lets me open up and walk through what's happening, what is my code doing, what is it on the server, what's happening, as well as it being safe. So let me take one look. I'm going to change from the safe process template to the data pipeline service, because I want to just pull open maybe a particular piece of code here, this JSON to blob worker or something like that, and you can pull it open and you can see that even though this happens to be Python, if you look, it's got it all nice and highlighted for me, really very, very usable. And I can even do a comparison and see what are things that have changed. Now it looks like you've got a nice little comment here, and that's about the only thing that's changed. I'm looking at it now in inline. We can go to side by side, etc. But the basic idea here is that in this code area, I've got a lot of very powerful functionality to track my code and to have a centralized place where people can send their changes. Let's go to work. This next little area here is where we talk about tracking the work we need to do. Now we're going to dive into this in a lot more detail later, but when we look at this work tab, we see a couple things. There are things that I need to do. Refactor SQL queries, upgrade to 64-bit Python 3 dot something, right? There are things that need to get done, as well as there are bugs. And I can take that bug, for instance, and drag it up and prioritize it however I want. I can move things around and set their priorities. I can also visualize my work on this board. And if I happen to be using Scrum or some other iterative technique, I can break things down into sprints very, very easily. Again, that's for a later look. This is just a quick overview. And why do you care about having your work in Visual Studio Online? Frankly, Visual Studio Online is a central point of truth where you can share knowledge among your entire team, or if you're an individual, you can keep track of those things that you might just forget over time. Now, as we'll see later, if I look down again at my little board, I see this nice flow, and I can also see if I'm working on too much stuff, I might be foreshadowing a bit much, but let's keep moving on. I also have a way that I can query for all these work items. Like if I go to my shared queries, and I'm going to open up those deferred work. What are we working on? Basically, this is some technical debt that we've accrued, and we've kind of deferred it for later, even though it's really important, right? Things like that Python error, or refactoring Python onto a worker role in Azure. These are things that we've deferred doing now, but we want to do later. But the idea is we're able to just very quickly see them and identify them, and they're just right here. Next, let's take a look at our build tab. And the build tab allows us to go out and see all of the builds that we have running. And we can see, for instance, the web build. We can look at that and see that in the last 14 days, what builds have occurred. And we can see, James, you triggered one that failed here.
Yeah, I do it from time to time.
Yep, we can open it up, and we can see why it failed. It looks like there was a PowerShell that didn't exist at that moment in time. So we can see why things failed. We can download those builds. We can assign some quality. This one's a rejected build, right? Terrible quality. So we can do these sorts of things. Again, why do I have this tab? The reason you have this tab, and the reason that Microsoft provides the automated build functionality, is because you can take the work that you've been working on, the code you've been coding against, and you can create an automated build that wraps the information about those two things, compiles it, runs some tests, and lets you know if you might have some problems in your code. You're getting that really fast feedback cadence. And that's one of the things that I love about Visual Studio Online. It's the ability to get a very fast, interactive cadence going in the work items, in the source code, and in the builds as well. But let's not stop at builds.
Yeah.
Let's go look at tests. And if you jump over to test, you can see that we can create test plans and decompose them into test cases, and those test cases can have test steps that help us execute our tests. Now, in this particular test plan, what I'm doing is I've got a test plan called curl route scripts here, or a suite of tests called curl route scripts, and these are just ways that we're testing out some of the routes. And they're manual tests, and I can run these manual tests, and I can, if I run them right here, I can pass them, I can fail them, I can do all sorts of different things right from here. So when I run it, I can say, this test failed, this test passed, etc. So these are another way to get that fast feedback. And when I run a test from here and validate it, James, you can be sure that the code that I wrote has been tested to at least this level, that I have these tests. Now, I want to stress one thing before I leave. This is the web view of all this. And there's a lot of neat stuff here. But if you want to do true, powerful testing, including automated testing and other sorts of testing, it lights up with Visual Studio. So you can use Visual Studio with Visual Studio Online in much the same way that you use Visual Studio against Team Foundation Server. You know what? It's probably fair for me to mention, too, that if I'm on VSO, I am not tied to Visual Studio. I actually can go out and I can be using Xcode. I can be using something else. I mean, the demo we showed was Python, right? And frankly, I've fired up Notepad to do a couple edits in here. It all works with a vast number of different IDEs, integrated development environments. So if you were using, you can use VSO with Xcode, with Eclipse, with Visual Studio, a lot of different things, and not just for even Windows development. We can be developing on anything with Visual Studio Online. So that's a real fast overview. And I guess it wasn't actually that fast, but it was a pretty big overview.
There's lots and lots of different services that Visual Studio Online provides, right? The build service, the testing service, all that sort of stuff. Now, as a new user, how would I get started with this, right? I created an account, but what do I do?
That's a great question. So how do we just get started? How would you, if you want to get started with Visual Studio Online today, do that? Let's walk through that demo. And I'm going to minimize this and pull open a blank screen. About blank, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to browse to tfs.visualstudio.com. Now you can go directly to www.visualstudio.com, and there's a link there as well. But I kind of like this one because that link brings you right here as well. But you have to one more click. But you can see what is Visual Studio Online, what it does. You can see, create private cloud-hosted source code repositories, all sorts of information about it. I really like this view. And in addition, it's got this nice button here that says Get Started for free. No credit card required, nothing, easy, boom. So we have to sign in to our account. And I'm going to sign into a brand new one that's never been used before. That's demo.nwc@outlook.com. And I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Now, this is any live ID. This is the brilliance of this. If you have signed up to Hotmail, Outlook.com, whatever.
Xbox Live account.
Xbox Live. As long as you have a Visual Studio or a Microsoft ID, you can create a Visual Studio account. And now I'm creating what would be my Visual Studio account ID. So I'm going to give my full name in here, and I might call this my full name being demo account, I don't know, something like that. And then I have to come up with my account URL. This is probably the hardest part, right? Because you want something snazzy and easy to remember. So I'll use demo NWC account, terrible account name, and create the account. When I create that account, It's spinning up that URL, spinning up all the infrastructure for me, and giving me, boom, my own account. I can now start inviting people to it. I can create my first project from here, but that's it.
That was so fast.
That's how easy it is, yes.
Really, really quick to just get your own account right away.
Yep.
30 seconds.
Absolutely. And if you happen to have blown that you did a misspelling on your account, you can always change that at a later time. So.
Cool.
Excellent. That's it. That's how easy it is, James.
It's really, really easy.
So go out, fire it up. If you don't have a Live ID or a Microsoft ID, you can set one up on Outlook.com or kind of anywhere. Set up one, go to tfs.visualstudio.com, click the Get Started for Free button, and you're in. That's all it takes.